I've almost had this camera for a year now, so I thought I'd give you guys an update, a long-term review, and share with you guys what I like about this camera, what I don't like about this camera. Again, this is the Sony A7cii to see if my mind has changed about certain aspects of this camera. You know, when you're in the honeymoon stages, it's kind of hard to say bad things because you really like the camera so much during that stage, right? So now that we have some time, almost a year, let's just get right into it, and let's start off with the first thing I like about this camera, and that is the size and the aesthetic of this camera. It's not a Fujifilm X106, but I still think it's a good looking camera. The size is something that threw me off too, because putting this side by side against my Fujifilm X-T5, which is a crop sensor body, you can truly appreciate how compact and small this camera is. It's amazing that they can cram in so much tech into this little body, like truly is. So I've been pairing this camera with the 7 Artisan's 35mm f1.4 Mark III, and I've been loving this combo. It's small and it's compact. It makes the shooting experience much more enjoyable. Now, in order to appreciate this camera, I found that you're going to need to shoot with the compact and the lighter lenses out there. The 50mm f1.4 G Master is a lens that I use a lot on this body, and I find that the pairing can be a bit tedious to hold after a while because it is front heavy. My hand does start to fatigue because of the camera imbalance. However, with something like this, the 7 Artisan lens right here that I'm using, or something like the Viltrox 20mm f2.8, I have zero issues with hand fatigue, and I can capture more shots, and it makes it more fun to shoot. Now, another thing that I like from this camera is the image quality. I've been getting more confident in editing with the Sony RAW files, and I do enjoy how my images look out of this camera. I can say that my images are razor sharp. It has a crisp to it. It has a punchy look to it, and unfortunately, they are not Fuji colors, but that's fine with me. I also like the fact that this camera is 33 megapixels. Handling a ton of RAW files is much more manageable to me, and I do appreciate it. If I'm being honest, I always felt that 24 to 33 megapixels is more than enough, is the sweet spot for me. I'm not a heavy cropper, so I like to get it right in camera rather than trying to crop things in post. So the 33 megapixel is more than enough for me. And if I do decide to crop in, I still have some resolution left over, which is great. Now, another thing I like about this camera is the autofocusing. I know Sony shooters are already spoiled to this autofocusing system, but I shoot a lot of Fujifilm as well. And this past, several months have been like a fever dream of shitty autofocus, and yet no word from Fujifilm to address this issue yet. Let me just say another feature that I love about the A7cii is the touch to track focus for video. It is so sticky, it is so smart, given that there is a new AI chipset in this camera. I can just tap the subject and have the camera track it, and all I have to worry about is composition afterwards, which makes my life so much easier. Now, this is a nice feature to have, like honestly it is. Eye tracking is also really nice because I shoot a lot of portraits and I want a reliable autofocusing system, which the Fujifilm system does not have. So what gives, Fuji? Like get your shit together. Otherwise, I'm switching to Sony. I already got this Sony, but don't make me switch to Sony exclusively because I'll freaking do it, man. I'll fucking do it. The autofocusing just works so well, and in my Fujifilm X-T5 versus the Sony A6700, for example, I know that is not the A7cii, but it has the same processor chip inside, so the autofocusing tracking should be very similar from the A6700 to the A7cii, so that's why I'm mentioning it in this video. But in that testing I did, the Fujifilm X-T5 scored a whopping 25% in hit rate, whereas the Sony A6700 got a 97%, which is freaking nuts. So great job, Sony, for making such an amazing autofocusing system. It's not 100% perfect, but it beats having a Fujifilm right about now. So what are some things that I don't like about this camera? I don't like the fact that this camera doesn't have a joystick. It would have been nice to have a joystick. It would have made my shooting experience a lot better, in my opinion. Another thing I don't like is the EVF. This is the worst EVF that I've ever shot with in my entire life. It's a piece of shit. There's no sugarcoating it. It's just hard to see in that thing. Another thing is the menu. Still a bit confusing for me after a year. It still takes me a while to get to the right settings. I'm not as proficient in the Sony menu as I am with the Fujifilm. I did get better at it, but I still think it's confusing a bit. Another thing is the memory card slot. I know Sony's got to protect their Sony camera line, so there are certain things they have to remove to hit a certain price point on this camera. So I get it. I don't care for a second card slot anyways. I'm okay with just having one. However, if you were to make it one card slot, why couldn't you, Sony, just made it so that it could use the CF Express Type A as well, and it's backwards compatible with the SD card slot. That would have been nice since I have some CF Express Type A cards from the days of shooting with the Sony A7S III and the Sony A7 IV. I would have loved to use it in this camera, and that would have been great. And another thing that I don't like is the maximum shutter speed on this camera. It only goes up to 1/4000 of a second. Me living in the south of Portugal, it's sunny here and it's bright. And even shooting at the lowest ISO setting possible with the f1.4 G Master lens, 1/4000 isn't enough. So I would have loved to see it extend more. Like, I know my Fujifilm X-T5, once it switched over to electronic shutter, it can do 1/180,000 of a second. And that goes the same for my X100VI as well. So yeah, that's some of the things that I don't like about this camera. And then here are some things that I didn't care for after 1 year with the Sony A7C II. The video AI tracking, where they follow you around. I thought it was a cool feature to have, where they track you and then, you know, they zoom in and out depending on where you move and stuff. But I don't use it ever. It's nice that it's there, but I haven't used it and I don't see the need for it. Another thing is the video specs. This camera has amazing video features and it makes for a good hybrid camera for videos and photos. Shoots 4K video, 10-bit recording. This camera oversamples from the 7K sensor and gives you a nice, sharper looking 4K image. Whenever I use it, I really like the look, but honestly, this camera has just been strictly for photography. But I'm glad to know that if one of my cameras stops working, I can use this camera to film content because it's amazing video specs in here. So over this past year of shooting with the Sony A7C II, I have grown to appreciate this camera a little more and appreciate Sony just a little bit more. I know before I started shooting with Sony, I always clowned them for their, you know, shitty color science. I don't understood why people went to Sony because I always thought color science was the most important to me. But now I totally get it. I totally get it. I understand, guys. So don't get at me. I've matured. I come to a realization that color science doesn't mean shit for some of you guys. It's a me problem. I've looked within and dealt with it. The reason why I got this camera in the first place, I was looking at some of my old photos shot with the Sony A7 IV, which has the same sensor, by the way, if you guys didn't know that. I looked at on all my photos that I shot, and I was like really surprised by how good it looked. I missed having that full frame look, but I did not miss that chunky body on the Sony A7 IV. So when this camera was announced and was released, I was very interested in the size of that camera. Just what I needed. I just wanted a full frame camera that's in a compact size, and like, this camera isn't perfect right out of the box when it comes to the handling. I still think the grip and the body feels a bit weird for my hands, and that's why I got this hand grip right here. I got myself a small rig hand grip for this camera, and it helped improve the handling and the shooting experience. Now, like I said, I just want something small to carry around with me. I wanted that full frame look. And shooting with the Fuji X system got really boring to me at a certain point because their past few releases have been boring in my eyes and it doesn't seem exciting anymore. And factor in the terrible firmware updates that they've been giving us, it just pushed me to use the Sony A7C II a little bit more. And I am understanding the quirks that this camera has and being able to navigate through it. It's been annoying at times with these quirks, but you can't argue with results. The results are there. The images I get are amazing. It looks really, really good, and to me, that makes up for the quirkiness that this camera has. It's not a perfect camera, but it's a pretty good camera. It's got a lot of great specs for photos, videos, got that AI chipset for tracking subject, which is insane, all in a tiny camera body, which is freaking great. Now, if you're interested in the Sony A7C II, I'll leave the links down in the description below. But what are your thoughts on the A7C II? Let me know in the comments, and yeah, that's it for me. This is my 1 year. I hope you guys learned something. I hope this video helps you make a better informed decision. If it did, consider subscribing for more content like this. And thanks so much.